Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today, I'll be reviewing Soulstealer by McInerney. So, this was one of the books that was assigned to me during my partnership with Philip Chase on his SPFBO review team. If you don't know what SPFBO is the self-published fantasy blog off. Essentially, it is a competition where 600 books go head-to-head, reviewed by a group of fantasy book reviewers. So Philip Chase is one of those book reviewers, and last year he did the whole thing by himself, and he read like 30 books. This year, what he's done is he's recruited a team, and each of us have read 6 books, and all 6 are going to, and we've all given our 6 finalists to Philip. Now, Soulstealer was my finalist for SPFBO, so I'm going to go through now and give you my non-spoiler review, and I'm really specific about non-spoilers on this one because I do think that everybody should be reading this one. It is a really, really interesting, really fascinating book that I had a lot of time reading, really entertaining, and I want to kind of run through the basic story overview, some of the major characters, and then kind of as a wrap up, like my conclusion and main feeling and like the thought and the scores and that sort of thing. So I'm going to put this down now because I'm not going to hold this up throughout the entire review because that would be silly. So Soulstealer is the story of essentially a world that has recovered from something they call the Ruin, which is basically a magical apocalypse. So the whole of the world of Soulstealer is covered in what is called the lace or the cloth. I think it's the cloth actually. I think when I'm thinking of lace, I might be thinking of something else. Anyway, it's covered something called the cloth, and you can manipulate and use magic to do things with the cloth. Like, for example, one type of the magic users in the story is able to tear holes in the cloth and instantly teleport from place to place. And the more and more magic is used, the more damage there is to the cloth, and then what happens is a kind of magical nuclear bomb apocalypse event sort of thing. And this happened a couple of hundred years ago in a war with mages who were summoning these kind of demonic monsters called Ilk. So the Ilk mages kind of tried to take on the rest of the world. And the two civilizations of the world, one begins with a V and one is Eurasians, I think, but one of them begins with a V. And the way that it works is that so there's the Eurasians guys, they have an illusion magic. So a lot of their magic is like invisibility, casting illusions, and they live in secrecy. Essentially, their entire race is thought to have been destroyed, and the very, very few surviving members have created this kind of pocket society hidden in a gigantic wood, and they have like a little town there, and the town is hidden by illusions but also is covered in illusions. So all of the houses are like basic wooden brick and stuff, but with illusions they're able to look like opulent, lovely houses. So they live in this relative safety and kind of wealth, as it were, in this nice small community. And the leader of that community, or kind of the spiritual leader, I guess, because he's not the political leader, the spiritual leader of that community is called Alexios. And Alexios is the keeper, and what he does is he absorbs the souls of people who are near death, and those extend his life, but those souls also join his kind of being, and he's able to talk to them, he's able to share their knowledge and their experience. So if they know something, he can learn it as well. And we then have the other race, which is much closer to kind of like a medieval Europe sort of level, and there we have a really fascinating tension in that kind of part of the world between the I want to say Venusians, but that's people who are from Venus, so I don't think it's that, but it begins with a V. It's not a not a hugely important plot point. Anyway, so we've got these guys, and they have this real tension at the moment between kind of the new developing society, which is fairly religious based, and then the old society, which was kind of deferential to these ruling families of mages. And they're called Weaver mages, and they're able to do some of the more traditional magic stuff. So, you know, fireballs, like electricity, things like that, you know, like elemental magic. But they also are able to do lots of interesting things. And those mages live in a big tower called the Tower of Weavers. And, you know, there's actually a prequel novel coming out soon from Elle, which is based around someone going to that tower and learning the magic of the Weavers, which I think sounds really good. It's on Kickstarter at the moment, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading that one. I should have kickstarted it, actually. I need to remember to do that once I've done the interview with Elle next week. Anyway, so we've got this secondary society, which is kind of split between this religion and these mages. And then, as I was saying, they have a real conflict between kind of the old and the new, in that they have this kind of inner city that's like new, and it's, they have this like inner city, which is where all the like people of status live. And then in the outer city, they have like slums, essentially, and that's where another character whose name is Faye. So she grew up in these slums, and she grew up forced into sex work, which is unpleasant, obviously, but it is a really, really interesting backstory for her character. It's not something that I've really seen in fantasy before, and I mean, I know that I don't always read the most grimdark stuff. Like, I've read Game of Thrones, I've read some more grimdark stories, but I'm not seeking out grimdark in many ways, and often I won't read something like I haven't read Joe Abercrombie yet, for example, though I will do very soon. And so Faye has come from this background of like sex work, which then kind of shifted into working for a mob boss in a criminal gang, and this mob boss in the criminal gang gets her into the priesthood. So she becomes a priestess, and so she's kind of out and away from the criminal life, but she is spying on the priests for the criminals. And the kind of dichotomy between who she has to be as a priestess and who she is as a criminal, I guess, I thought was really interesting. We'll come back around to characters more later, but the characters are fairly hooked in with their locations, if that makes sense. So the final location that we spend time with in the book is a set of islands on which a very tribal people lives. And these tribal people are deathly afraid of the magical abilities to do things like tear holes in the cloth and travel from place to place, or use telekinesis to lift objects with their minds and things like that, and to expand the senses, which is kind of like their ancestral magic. And the main character from that part of the world is called Ina, and she has this magic. She has what is called the curse, but she's hidden it because all children who are found to have the curse are killed when they're like 8 or 9 years old. So genuinely very tragic. Not a nice thing to read about, especially as somebody with children. And so what happens is, fairly near to the beginning of the book, we see Alexios's world kind of crumble when the Ilk return, and an Ilk mage with an army of these monsters basically turns up at the gates of the Eurasian settlement. And this kind of starts a protracted siege. And so we have this siege of that city going on. We have then the other storyline going on with Faye, where she is trying to find out the secrets of the church. And then we have Ina, who's kind of trying to hide her magical curse. Now, before we go on to talking about the characters in depth, I want to pivot over and have a quick message from our sponsors. Hey, I'm hiding behind a tree, and I'm here to talk to you about Your Paper Quest, a bookish subscription box which is kindly sponsoring this month of content on the channel. If Your Paper Quest, if you haven't heard of them, is a independently published subscription box. So you'll get 2 indie books every single month, selected by the Your Paper Quest team across a certain theme or genre. So it could be fantasy, sci-fi, horror, all that sort of thing. On top of those books, you'll also get access to the Your Paper Quest book club, where you can talk to other subscribers about the books that you're reading. You'll also get some bookish bits in the box. You'll be able to ask questions of the authors who've written those books, and you'll get a monthly interview with those authors. If you're interested, you can subscribe from the US and the UK on a monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly basis, whatever your reading pace is, and you can use my discount code SAM20 to get 20% off of your subscription. Okay, so moving on to characters in specific now, rather than just talking about them as kind of aspects of their place where they're living. So we'll start with Ina because that's where the book starts. So it's very interesting that Ina and her society is kind of very tribal. They feel a little bit like, they feel a lot more backwards in terms of their technology and in terms of their like styles of life. You know, they live in tents, they live on these this series of islands, and essentially Ina's people fled after the previous Ilk War during the ruin to these islands, and the surviving people were a very small number, and in order to kind of restore the civilization, a set of rules are made. So all men and women must have children, no matter whether they are straight or gay, and we actually have a couple of examples of that. So Ina herself is gay, and her partner has a husband as well. So it's kind of, their society is queer normative, it's non-monogamous. However, so Ina's partner and her husband have a daughter, and her daughter, they have found out, has the curse, so has the ability to manipulate and use magic and things like that. And so it falls to Ina to be like, well, what do I do here? You know, this is my lover's child. I care primarily about, she cares primarily about her girlfriend, her lover. She hates her girlfriend's husband. And while she likes the child, it's not her child, you know, that's, and she's like, well, I should protect her, but if I protect her, then I'll reveal that I am cursed, and that's what's happened. You know, I could get into I could have a serious issue. So she's kind of battling with her past as kind of hiding her magical abilities, hiding her curse. She's battling with the husband who she hates and he hates her. And she's kind of wrestling against society. You know, she has this curse, and she knows that she's not evil. She's not, you know, tempted by this dark god that everyone is worried about, Siut. And there's a lot of really interesting drama with her character, and I feel like she has the most kind of interpersonal drama going on, because she obviously has her lover and her family and her lover's family, and her relationship with the tribe is kind of rocky, if that makes sense. And she's also kind of exploring her magical abilities. I really liked all 3 characters. I think I connected with Faye the most, but Alexios and Ina were both very, very kind of same sort of level. Like, I liked them both, but I was like, I want to know what's going on with Faye. There's a really interesting thing. In fact, we'll go on to Faye now. So Faye is the character I talked about previously, who used to be a sex worker, and she is now kind of undercover in the priesthood, working for working for the kind of head of the criminal gangs in the slum side of her city. So I think it's called Arendelle actually, and I feel like that I was like, wait, isn't that the name of the city from Frozen? Because like my son loves Frozen, I half listen to it sometimes, but I think that's Arundel or Arendelle. Anyway, so she kind of comes from these slums, and she has this quite horrid backstory. It's quite grim, but not in a like gratuitous way. I feel like every time it's brought up and discussed, I feel like it's very much like this is an essential part of this character. It's not brought up, you know, in a way that you might consider to be titillating. Like that's one of the things, like Tori Tekken recently did a video on sexual violence in fantasy, and one of the things there was that she talked about how she's often read sexual violence in fantasy and has been like, this seems like it could almost have been written to be exciting and titillating, and that's not what this is at all. It's very much, you know, a dark event in her past that she is kind of running away from, really. And she's run away from that past into the priesthood, under the direction of this mob boss called Moth, who basically runs all the criminal gangs in New Arendelle, which is the name of the slum. And Moth has basically said, like, right, I've found out that there's a secret part of the monastery. I need you to get into it. And I don't care how, I need you to get into it, and it needs to be quick. And some really interesting stuff going on there. Like, she is kind of hunting around the monastery, trying to find her way into this secret room, and she's using these like thief and spy tricks, which I thought were really cool. Like she does a thing where she takes a key and makes a mold of it so she can have her own key made for this secret library. And then we've also got there's a like kind of gross lecherous priest who has like worked out her backstory, and he's like pressuring her. There's loads of really good stuff going on there, and there's like a lot of characters that I'm like, this person's going to turn out to be the bad guy or related to the bad guys or something like that. And I won't spoil anything, but I was wrong in some ways, and although I think I might have predicted a future book. But so yeah, Faye was my favourite character. I think that the supporting characters in her story were really good as well. So you got Ruard, who is a major supporting character and actually gets a few POV chapters later in the book. He is a guard who works for Moth, the mob boss, and he has a history being a soldier in foreign wars. And his backstory I thought was really interesting. You don't get a big flash of it, but the bit that you see was good. And it does feel like Elle, as she was writing the book, liked Ruard more and more, because he gets more and more screen time as the book goes on. So we're spending more time with Faye and her supporting cast, and it feels like a lot of the like thrilling mystery intrigue stuff is coming from Faye's side. So you have like the personal drama from Ina, you have this like interesting mystery with this like kind of horror-y crime undertone from Faye's story, which I really liked. And then you have this kind of like stranger in a strange land sort of narrative from Alexios, because obviously he's been sequestered in there. Vicenia, that's the name of the place. Vicenia. I got it, I remembered. So Alexios has been sequestered in the Eurasian village, and he finds out that he has to leave to try and help them fight off this siege. And he goes to Vicenia, to Arendelle, and hijinks ensue essentially for him. And so he's got this kind of stranger in a strange land sort of thing going on, which I really enjoyed. And he also has a very, very strict moral code. which he kind of finds under attack when he leaves his hometown. So yeah, that's kind of Faye and Alexios really in a nutshell. Alexios has feels like he has the least page time, because his page time is kind of concentrated towards the beginning and the end, because he's kind of indisposed in the middle. But I also really liked the interaction between Faye and Alexios. I thought that they had a really good relationship that was built across the bits when they meet, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully all three characters meeting in a future book. That is, I guess, the world's lightest spoiler. So I do apologise if you wanted to go in blind, but if you want to go in blind, you probably shouldn't watch this video. You should have just bought it, because that's how good it is. So, as I was saying, yes, this ended up being my recommendation for SPFBO. So this and Surviving Westcliff both were 4-star reads for me. And it was genuinely, I was coming to a toss-up as to whether Soulstealer or Surviving Westcliff was going to be my final entry. And when I sat down and I really thought about it, I was like, Surviving Westcliff is a genuinely fantastic book, and I recommend everyone read. It's a really nice, short, fun, thrill ride. But when I'm looking at Soulstealer, I was like, because of the magic system, because of the world building on display here, I do feel like this will appeal more to the judging panel. And I have a feeling that something like Soulstealer could go all the way. It might not win, but I do feel like it could get pretty far. Whereas Surviving Westcliff, I know, because it doesn't have a lot of fantasy, it doesn't really have any explicit fantasy elements, I think that there would be some judges that would dismiss it out of hand. And I don't feel that's fair to the book, in terms of the book is very high quality. So I ended up picking Soulstealer purely because I felt like, honestly, this one has the chance to go all the way. And Surviving Westcliff is very, very good. And if you haven't read it, you should read it. And you can watch my review and you can watch my interview with the author, Thomas Perkins. Speaking of interviews, I'm also going to be interviewing McInerney. So we're recording the interview this week and it'll be posting next week. So if you are interested in hearing more about her writing process, more about Soulstealer, more about the prequel book Overlord, and more about SPFBO in general, please do give that one a watch. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. It's going to be, it's in a few days now. So this one's going up the day I'm recording it, but that one obviously is further down the line. This book also, by the way, so I got a free copy of this through SPFBO. However, it is on Kindle Unlimited, so I did switch to that, so I can give her a few pennies, however much Kindle Unlimited gives you when you read a full book there. But if you are interested in this book, like I said, it's on Kindle Unlimited. It's also been on sale a couple of times recently, so I think it was 99p and I think it's been $1.99. It's not a hideously expensive Kindle book, so definitely one that I would recommend. And if you are looking for a story that kind of gives you those vibes of like the epic fantasies, but is also queer normative and has kind of 2 leading female POVs out of 3, then I genuinely would recommend it. I really like the potential here as well. I can see this being a long series, I can see this being a short series, but there's so much world to explore. There's loads of other, there's a few dotted mentions of other parts of the world, there's a part of the world that's basically constantly at war. There's this kind of deprived mining country up north that Ruad is from, and there's lots of really interesting things going on and lots of places that we could go as a story. So I'm really looking forward to reading more in this world. I'll definitely be back in the Overlord Kickstarter and reading that one as soon as I can get my hands on it. Now, is this the first review of Self-Pub September? Because last week was a recursion. So this is the first review of a Self-Pub book in Self-Pub September. So let me know what Self-Pub books you're reading. Let me know if you want to read Soulstealer. I do hope that I have sold you on this book. I genuinely really loved it. and drop down in the comments and let's have a conversation about some fantastic self-published fantasy. Please like this video if you've liked it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are covering self-published books all month in September, and I'm posting, as always, if this is your first video of mine, I post videos Monday through Friday at 5 PM on science fiction and fantasy books. So if that sounds like your bag, it's time to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I will speak to you tomorrow.